Very good afternoon to the Sportsfan Radio panel. We've been off for a few weeks, but there's been plenty happening in sport, and not the least of which are the Socceroos, who another team punching above their weight. How did you see it, Judge?
Oh, fantastic, Mark. Really, I thought we were a little bit fortunate to get there. You know, we look at sides like Italy, Sweden, Chile, Colombia. These sort of pedigree don't make it. It sort of just shows you how, I don't know, privileged we were to sort of be there in the first place. And we certainly went through the hard way, but once we got there, I thought we actually acquitted ourselves really well. I was very proud of the team, actually proud to be an Australian person, but I've never given, soccer as we call it, but it should be called football. I've never given football probably the dues that it deserves, but it was a fantastic performance all around. And apart from the first game, which we're just outclassed, I thought we got 2 wins, 2 clean sheets, and anything could have happened with Argentina. So
I was going to say, John, what did you think after the first game against France?
Oh, look, it's France, Gelding,
who were the reigning champions.
Oh, look, and they're just there. We have to realise that we're a small country that not only do not punch above our weight in terms of football, it's probably our 3rd or 4th biggest game. Whereas for these people, the South Americans, the Europeans, soccer's everything. And so I heard this ridiculous comment from Mark Milligan, who said Australia scored too early against France. And you sort of think of anything, commentary gets ridiculous. What are we supposed to do? So, okay, guys, I want you to score, but not before the 27th minute.
I was going to just jump in on that and say, when you say how fanatical countries are, the joke about Italy, there's 60 million national coaches, and they didn't even make it, and yet we're there. And forgive me on the numbers, but I think our total valuation of our squad was 60 million. Lionel Messi is valued at 300 million. So 1/5 of one player, yet we pushed them all the way. And if that's not Aussie spirit, I don't know what is.
Yep, he did push us out of the whole tournament, though, Giraffe.
Yeah, he might have added a bit of value to his his salary there. He's about to join David Beckham's club in America, apparently. So he is in what they call the twilight of his career. But I was incredibly proud. But I watched that first game against France with some work colleagues in a room at work, and it was quite deflating. You're playing the best or one of the best teams, but you had people screaming at the TV saying, try this, try that, but it's just difficult. It's like bringing a water pistol to a gunfight. We just didn't have it against that team, but that doesn't mean, and draw a rugby league parallel, it doesn't mean we can't put in a fine effort like Samoa in the World Cup. We certainly gave it a shot against, as you said, Judge, countries that have this as their only real sport, academies, and just live the game. Whereas we've got a team cobbled together. Some of these players most Australians hadn't heard of, let alone the world. And it was just inspiring, I thought, those last 2 games.
Paul, we had a player that has never played a professional game of football. Qual, he's never played a game. Yep. He's an Australian team. I love the Times newspaper said it was a triumph of mentality over pedigree. I reckon that sort of sums it up. We really try hard. The players left it all out there. We just don't have the quality that other countries possess because of the way we structure our sports in Australia, which is basically Aussie rules, your game, Paul, and cricket and netball over anything else.
And you've got to spare a thought for England, who just bottle at every World Cup, every big tournament. But I did just get a news flash just in. Harry Kane's penalty has just landed. So it's just landed back to earth. Anyway, so you imagine if you're English, you really would not be feeling great at the moment because every tournament they're talked up is going to win it. They're expected to win it. The hype, at least we don't have that. We're always overachieving, and that's a much better feeling than the deflation of never performing.
So where to for Graham Arnold, who has been on thin ice, so they say, because we didn't automatically qualify for the World Cup. Australia are the last team into the tournament. As you said, Judge, kept 2 clean sheets. It's the only World Cup they've competed in where they've actually won 2 games. They scored in every game, including against Argentina. In fact, they had a chance to level the scores in about the 85th minute. I figured that if Australia had have levelled the scores, I think the Argentine psyche might have acted against them, and they may have had trouble keeping Australia out. But in any event, that wasn't the point. The point of the question is, I would have thought Graham Arnold can now write his own ticket to coaching Australia for the next 4 years. Wouldn't that be the case?
Well, I've got to jump in, and Gelding, sorry to do this, but it's very similar to the Damien Hardwick scenario. That a very good friend of mine who knows his football, I won't name him, but said it's the worst Australian team and the worst coach we've ever had. And yet, look what happened. So I'm sure from here, they will have to show the faith in Graham Arnold, given the achievements at this World Cup, which would have to be one of the, apart from, I guess, Croatia's doing well, Morocco would be the standout story of the tournament, making the semi-finals. But Australia's not far off. And Graham Arnold, who lives, sleeps and breathes football, surely, as you said, Professor, can be around a while.
Professor, wasn't the word on Graham Arnold that he's a defensive coach? And as you rightly pointed out, we've scored in every game that they played in. But the word on it originally was that he was going to stack the defence, go 4-4-2 in a setup, and therefore have a lot of players behind the ball, and we weren't expected to score.
I think, Gelding, you sort of you play the cards that you've been dealt. And look, I'm not an expert in this game, but it just seems to me that it's not the so much we've got a defensive mentality. We just don't have the cattle up front who are renowned scorers. Bearing in mind, Rogic wasn't playing. Mind you, most teams had players out.
Yeah.
No, but you think, Coutta? G'day, Coutta. But about your view, but I think they'd be crazy to get rid of Arnold and go searching for what the 30th best coach in the world that might come from Europe or South America. And it sounds good, but gee, Arnold knows Australian sport. He knows Australian soccer, like nobody else does. He knows all the players, and his commitment over certainly over the last 12 months, I think it's been extraordinary for Australia.
There's got to be
biggest crime. He doesn't have an exotic surname. That's his crime.
No, but he's got to have reward for effort, John. I think you're exactly right there.
We're in Coutta.
Yeah, Couta's on mute at the moment.
Mark, while we're waiting for David from Morty Alec, good to see a couple of us wearing the Sportsfan Radio's hat. Obviously, John was missing on Tuesday, so he hasn't got his. But the giraffe has just gone something completely different.
I'll go and get it. I'll go and find it. Just give me a sec.
Geez, the pressure's put on there.
I'll come back with the old...
well, if you've got to wear a hat for a radio show, at least wear the one for the show.
Yeah. That's a good point. And I should put the shirt on as well. I should put the shirt on as well. So, but no, going back to your question, Judge, surely we've got the ability to breed a striker. Mitch Duke's header was unbelievable, and obviously Goodwin from the A-League had a couple of strikes, but outside of that, really, we were pretty impotent. But don't you play to win? So defensively, who cares? Like if you park the bus, do we really care? Like, aren't we there to win? So. And he should actually be able to write his own ticket. He should be coaching. Is that a gravitas?
Gravitas beer.
It is. Oh.
Where'd you get that from, Paul?
You know what it tastes like? I was expecting pineapple or
passion fruit.
It tastes like a computer keyboard.
Oh.
Out of the Sportsfan Cup as well, which is nice. So you've really gone whole hog now. But I thought Australia did a great job at the World Cup. They finished top 16 in the world. Obviously, them and Japan both got through, which was a huge effort, considering the other teams that one didn't make it and those teams that didn't even qualify for the round of 16. So I would think that Graham Arnold probably get sacked because that's what we do. So he'll get sacked and we'll appoint, I don't know, someone from overseas maybe or someone like that. But I thought Graham, the issue with Graham Arnold is I think he would rub people up the wrong way. The way he does press conferences and the way he talks and communicates and all that, he rubs people up the wrong way. But one soccer manager doesn't do that.
Yeah. I suppose the question is, what is Australia calling success? Is success qualifying for the World Cup? Well, clearly not. Is success getting to the last 16? Well, I would have thought that is success. So that means Arnold's a successful coach. I don't see. I understand what you're saying, Coutta, and that could well be the case that he might get sacked. But I don't see how they could, given that if you're looking at the metrics of success, he's been successful in any way you look at it.
Professor, just on that. Why is it making the World Cup not success? We've only done it three times. So obviously that should be the first kind of KPI type thing as a successful coach. If you can get us into the World Cup, which only happened 3 times, surely that's got to be some success. And then to go on to the quarterfinals, the top 16, that's just a fantastic effort, isn't it?
I was going to say, Coutta, can we check the tape? How many points you predicted we'd get in the group stage? I think it was somewhere between 0 and 0, wasn't it?
I think it was dot.
Yeah.
And I actually didn't think we'd score. I actually did not think we'd score because our forward or our strikers are impotent. But no, we did. So, but Gelding, go back to your point though. This is what Australian soccer does to itself. It shoots itself in the foot. Now, what should be happening out of this is it should be a positive story. They had live sites at every state in Australia had a live site for the final, this round of 16. They should be gaining momentum out of this. They should be going right. We're going to appoint Graham Arnold. This is what we're going to do, etc., 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 right? But we know what will happen. What does it cost to play soccer in Australia at the moment? 600 a season or 800 a season. Now, that's crazy compared to other sports. Now, soccer or football, whatever they want to call it, should be riding the coattails of the World Cup because I think it's been a great World Cup so far. We've had the superstars performing quite well. Messi, you can tell he's coming to the end because he's starting to be a bit like Greg Louganis and dive for anything. But surely, right, the soccer or the Australian Football Federation should be gaining momentum out of this. Now, the A-League starts back again when? Who knows? The A-League is it irrelevant? Surely this is the time to get momentum going again for a sport that's severely lacking any profile.
Good. I would go so far as to say Australia's embarrassed by football. We know we don't belong. We don't belong in the upper echelons. We think we're down 40 and that's about where we belong. And oh my God, we get an Australian coach coaching us. Just shows you what bogans we are. We can't even get an international coach. And I think there's that feeling that we're just not good enough. We're not worthy. We're not belting up the other countries in the Commonwealth Games or not playing well at tennis or cricket, our major sports. And I just don't think the average Australian considers we belong with the world teams. And actually, this World Cup has shown we do belong. And this is a great chance for some momentum for football. And you know what? They'll stuff it up. There'll be some rancor over Graham Arnold because I think a lot of people don't like him, as Gelding says. And we just stuff the whole thing up again. But you're right, it's far too expensive and we don't encourage football enough in this country.
The couple of points there, Coutta. We're 7 games into the A-League season for you. And Football Australia has said they won't be rushed on a decision on Graham Arnold. So you wouldn't be feeling great if you're Graham Arnold. You'd be thinking, what more could I have done there? But that's Football Australia for you.
And let's not forget, Professor, that Australia's got one of the greatest soccer players of the current day. and that is Sam Kerr. She is one of the greats. And you look at the women's A League and the internationals that they get, they attract the best talent. And it's very similar and reminds me of the WBBL. The quality of females that are playing in the WBBL is second to none. We're talking international players from England, South Africa, New Zealand, and they attract the best talent. Whereas and I know we're moving sports, but the Big Bash, the number one draft pick, Livingston, that went to the Renegades, he pulled up stumps and said, well, I've got an opportunity to play Test cricket. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go play Test cricket. So they had to get a new player in, Martin Guptill, and it's like, well, how's the integrity of cricket at the moment? So, but yeah, I think for us as a nation, we've got this great opportunity. We've got Sam Kerr. We don't have the same equivalent in the men's at the moment. We did have, say, Tim Cahill or a Mark Viduka or Harry Kewell. On the topic of Harry Kewell, is there a more negative supporter or commentator than Harry Kewell? Anyway.
Coutta, I think you're right. And the other thing is the World Cup for women is next year. Australia and New Zealand are sharing it. Once again, it might be that the women are the saviours of Australian sport, because they've been in the Olympics for so long now. Women's basketball. I mean, look, really, as you mentioned, the cricket. And I think what will happen next year when we see Sam Kerr and some of the other players in Australia, that there'll be a women's-led football recovery, and that'll get players coming out and playing, particularly young girls.
Just on the A-League, Coutta, and to add to what Paul just said, the A-League resumed Friday night with one game, and there was 2 games last night. So if you missed that, it wouldn't surprise you, because there's been very little fanfare about them resuming.
Why would they have resumed when the World Cup's on, Professor? Did they not think we would go deeper than the round of 16?
I think they did make a bit of a show about some of the Socceroos players returning to their teams, but I don't think, again, it's like if 3 Socceroos fell over in a forest, would anyone see it? I don't think anyone really noticed it too much.
And the other thing about Coutta, Graham Arnold not being liked, Ange Postecoglou left because he wasn't liked, and he was reputedly not a good coach either. And just how good has he been in Japan and now with Celtic? He wins wherever he goes.
Why would you want to coach the Socceroos then?
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Just to add to derivation of word corner, fanfare, which I always thought comes from fans, something for the fans, is actually a word meaning trumpets, Arabic. So there you go. Just want to throw that in.
Yes, because it was a fanfare entering the arena, John.
That's right. Very good.
Yes.
Just on a similar word to fanfare, we didn't hear much from the Fanatics, Scooter. I know I, for one, was disappointed. Were they spotted at all? Probably not needed with all the Federation Square fanfare. Didn't hear much from them.
Yeah, it's Paul, you raised a very good point, and one that's very close to my heart. Australia needs people like the Fanatics. They've taken the golf world by storm. Let's not forget that they also represented the Americans. So good luck to them. But they
might have been busy with the Davis Cup commitments, the Fanatics.
Oh, the Davis Cup. Oh, shit.
We might get to that, Coutta.
Oh, jeez.
I just know I, for one, have missed the Aussie, oi, oi, oi. It never gets tired in this corner. And
no, it doesn't get old.
To be replies for mine.
No, it's one of the great chants, and it's going worldwide, and we really are bogans for having it. But the Fanatics, they bring absolutely 2/5 of nothing to anything.
Judge,
when I've seen Wales play in rugby union, their singing is pretty good. But to be amongst the Aussie, oi, 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 you know that's when you've got quality singing. That's Pavarotti level from the Fanatics, you know.
Pavarotti.
All right, Judge, let's just change gears. How desperate did the AFL look releasing their round 1 fixture at exactly the time that the Argentina-Australia match kicked off?
Yeah. Is there any direction at all from what used to be called AFL House? I don't know what it's called these days, but I just get the impression that if it can be stuffed up, they'll do it. You're right. Right at that moment, when there's some a bit of attention elsewhere, they go and release the round one fixture. Are they embarrassed by their fixture? I don't know, Professor, but another great moment for the current AFL management.
Well, yes, and I saw the explanation is, we always release it at about that time.
About the time we were playing a World Cup match, yeah, sure.
Professor, do you think the AFL is covering itself in glory at the moment? Over the last sort of fortnight, 3 weeks, we've had the AFL draft go for 2 nights.
That's one night too many.
Well, yeah, one night too many, definitely is. But the corporate sponsors are quite happy with it. We've now had the full fixture released, which is good. But the highlight for me, Professor, and the panel is gather round.
Oh,
now
that's a direct steal from rugby.
Well, gather round. So Travis Old, who I don't know what his title, he's got a title, something. He was being considered for the top role at the AFL.
Man in waiting, isn't it?
Well, after this week, Gelding, I'm not sure that he will be progressing any further, because he used the great term, it is what it is.
Mm.
Actually, he will go further if he's using that stuff, yeah. So I think last time we're also talking about Gil possibly could not step down or finish up this year. Obviously, he's going to go to round 5 next year and hopefully have everything sorted out. But there was word the other night that the next CEO will be Andrew Dillon, who's currently the man of all tasks, the right-hand man to Gil. So again, they've probably paid a couple of $100,000 to recruitment firms to find the best possible talent. And guess what? We found him. He's under the doorstep.
Coutta, you might recall I've been saying this for some time, Andrew Dillon. It's not because I'm a know-all. It's just that there is no plan B with the AFL. They are so S-head scared that they're going to muck this up, that the only person that knows where all the elephants are buried is Andrew Dillon. The AFL is an extraordinary organisation. They control the Menangatang thirds. They control everything. So any normal CEO, and forget the worldwide search, would come and say, I'm going to touch this. This place is crazy. Andrew Dillon's responsible for most of the contractual stuff that's glued the AFL together. And it really is a sort of a constructed, Lego piece. I don't think there is a plan B, because I don't think there can be a plan B.
Well, I've got to jump in, Judge, and sorry to break it in this manner, and I was sworn to secrecy. Plan P, Peter Volandis. So just it's been considered at the highest levels. The man who can't do a tie-up properly, but he can certainly run a sport.
Oh, Paul, he's crazy, but he's not that crazy.
Why would he take a step down in job, Paul?
He'd have the AFL draw beamed onto the side of the MCG or something like that. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, hanging, be a ferry race down the middle of Sydney Harbour.
That's
the other thing, Professor...
If I'm right, the AFL's stuffed. Let me just say that. If Andrew Dillon is the best person to run the CEO, it'll be a regressive step.
Well, he's not the best person, so...
He's not, but I bet you gets it.
Well, probably, yeah. So I think what it's highlighted, though, is that the AFL is a dictatorship. It's a closed shop. And just remember, though, Judge, we've talked about this before, there are no bad people involved in footy. Everyone is a good footy person.
Thank you for that.
Everyone, good footy people.
It's not like there's no such thing as a bad beer. It's just some are better than others. As I tip away at this gravitas.
How is the gravitas going?
How is the gravitas, Paul? Could you give us a critique of it?
I tell you, it doesn't taste like success. But it's not bad. I've got pine notes, a bit fruity, floral.
How's the aftertaste?
I'll let you know in half an hour.
Paul, does it taste as though it's the sweat off a lanyard?
Famous line?
What?
Isn't it the famous line from Austin Powers? Spits or swallows?
Something like that. I'm just disappointed you didn't get the lanyards done, Professor. I remember got the cap, the coffee mug, but the lanyards must still be in production, are they?
Yeah, they are. They're hard to come by, Paul.
Lanyards.
Yes.
Professor, so while we're on this, can I just bring up what you've got to do for next year, just as a possible suggestion?
Yes, certainly, Gelding.
The judge is on the crusade to bring the Golden Breed T-shirts back, and again, wearing it today splendidly. So maybe we should go the retro 70s Golden Breed look at Sportsfan Radio.
And I'll also chuck in a pair of Staggers flares if you like too. A bit tight around the crutch, but a bit tighter these days. But
yeah,
you're under the 70s.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, Judge, you wouldn't get into a stadium in Qatar wearing that rainbow.
Oh.
No. Coutta, question for you. Where was the AFLW CEO during the grand final presentations? Because I would have thought that was an auspicious occasion where a CEO of an organisation would be involved. We've been involved with football organisations, and board members and CEO are there presenting medallions. Didn't see her at all. Didn't hear her referred to either.
No, you raise a good point. She was at the ground, and she was sitting somewhere that they did get a camera shot of her, dressed very casually. You will also note, Professor, that the AFL CEO wasn't there either.
No, he was on holidays.
He was on holidays, Gillen. So is it Gillen or Gillen? I don't know. Anyway, so he was on holidays, but I was surprised that the AFLW general manager, she is Professor, she's not CEO, actually was not involved in the presentations at all. The girl that did the presentations, I believe, is a Channel 7 reporter.
It was terrible.
And it's obviously her first time doing presentations, because she read the names out faster than bloody Usain Bolt runs. It was like number one, number two. It was, don't let the girls get up there. And then she tried cracking jokes. And I'm thinking, hang on.
Yeah.
So no, I thought the actual presentations were rank. But at the end of the day, I thought the AFLW Grand Final was a huge success. All the complaints and the sooking about where it was being played, it was fantastic to see a full ground, a perfect playing surface, and yeah, people say it was a low-scoring game, but I would have thought that the game you watched is a significant improvement on what we've had in previous seasons, Professor.
Yeah. Let me ask you about this, Coutta, though. The optics. After the game, now we all know that part of the celebration are the players running around, talking to the crowd, displaying the Premiership Cup. The home team lost. By the time all the medals had been presented and the Premiership Cup was presented, and they'd had the photos taken, and then they went for their victory lap, there was hardly anybody in the ground. Now, I'm sitting there watching it on TV, and I'm thinking, this doesn't look good, because you've got them basically running around in front of nobody.
Well, they really only ran to one part of the ground, Professor. Let's be honest. Yeah. That was the left of screen to the cheer squad.
It made the GWS crowd look packed.
Yes, it certainly was a different look, and you would hope that next year. I know you've got an issue with this. Is that next year when the actual season's announced, whenever it is, that they actually book the grand final in for a venue. They actually book it in and go, right, we're going to book these grounds and go from there. Because this season, like, they didn't have a ground booked for the grand final. Like, what are we running here? An outhouse. So, yeah, touch wood, Professor, that they actually do give it the dues. Now, one thing that's in the news at the moment, bless you, Gelding, is a young fella called Harry Cheesel. who's just been recruited to North Melbourne Footy Club, who's been the victim, I'll use the word victim, of some horrendous racism on Facebook, social media. And then last Friday, on one of the radio stations, a caller talked about he'll bring money to the club because they're rich. Now, I haven't heard the AFL Players Association and our good friend Patrick Dangerfield, who I think might be on holidays. I think the CEO might be as well. But Nate, can you name any more useless organisations than one, the AFL Players Association, the AFL Coaches Association? I'm going to throw the ACCC in there as well. How do they not actually make a stand and say, right, we've got a young 18-year-old. It just blows the mind, Professor. Absolutely blows the mind. This young kid should be celebrated for playing, like being in the top 5. I think he was pick 2, maybe. Pick 3, sorry. But yeah, I'm staggered at the lack of response from anyone and the support that he's been given.
Yeah, look, it surprised me too, Coutta, but
it doesn't. It doesn't surprise.
No, it surprises me. And then when you think about it, it doesn't surprise you because the AFL, in my opinion, has been ineffective in effecting any real change to what we've seen in the behaviour of its supporters. And that's a reflection on them.
And it's the first Jewish player to enter the league in more than 2 decades. So they've had 2 decades, these morons and keyboard warriors, to climb out from under their rocks and just fire in some vile, disgusting.
So, Coutta, are we agreeing the AFL Players Association is a irrelevant organisation that's basically designed to prop up and support the best paid players in the league and stuff the rest?
Well, all they do at the end of the day, from what the outside sees, is that they negotiate the pay deals. I don't think they do much else. They might provide some opportunities or support for players once they exit, but who knows? Like Dangerfield, yeah. How you have a player as the president or whatever he is blows the mind a little bit. How can he be objective? Anyway.
To take heart, Coutta, I'm just reading the AFL Integrity Department is investigating as to whether those comments are genuine social media accounts. So as long as they're a genuine account, and if they're club members, that's the steps that the AFL Integrity Department are taking.
Coutta, the average AFL player's career is less than 3 seasons.
Correct.
The Players Association knows that. And so what they're going to play, 55 games, I think it is. So they don't have an interest in the vast majority of players because they don't think they're going to go anywhere. So as a result of that, the players in this guy's situation, just about to start, they are not on the radar of the AFLPA, and they should.
Well, Judge, one of the things that we've talked about previously, and Gelding can talk about it from a cricket perspective, is they talk about grassroots sport. Like it's the biggest joke of all time. Grassroots sport gets nothing from the AFL. I'll say that honestly.
Yeah.
They get an employee or they get 2 employees that sit at AFNL House or Southern, whatever, Linton Street, whatever it is, that are there to engage or to get players participating. No money actually goes down to the leagues anymore. And I think the same with cricket. If I'm not wrong, Gelding is the same.
Yeah, Cricket Australia do nothing. Cricket Victoria, they look after their premier teams, the Test cricket side, and you might have to get a grant if you're lucky enough, but you've got to fill out that many forms and grovel to that many people. You might get, and then they might give you $2,000.
And I think when they start announcing things like record rights deals and the like, and how that's going to impact grassroots community sport, well, they're talking about changing rooms or they're talking about club rooms and things like that. they're not actually talking about putting money into sport itself. And I suppose, like, when you have Brad Scott as the AFL Vic manager, I don't think he'd know much about grassroots sport.
Yeah, and we discussed that before, Coutta, haven't we? That
Yes.
That people get into these accelerated pathways into the elite areas, which they did. Then they're drafted, then they're in the AFL, and then they come back out. They really haven't had, maybe since they were in under 8s or under 10s, they've never really set foot anywhere that's really grassroots.
No, and I think one of the great things about they only play 53, 55 games, is that once they stop playing AFL, is that they will go back to local community sports. So they might go back and play VFL, or they might go back play, say, the Amateurs or Southern, and because of the publicity and everything, you've got a greater connection with these players. Now, Aaron Fiora, who Gelding would have watched quite a bit.
Yes, Fiona.
Yes. He played at East Ringwood for a few years. And the crap he copped, obviously being a high profile, but you would not come across a nicer guy, a better club man, and he put back into community or local sport. Admittedly, he's getting paid, but he would go to all the functions. He would, like, it was just fantastic. And I think that's where the AFL should be going, right. How do we help grassroots community sport? And the salary cap's $100,000 a year now. I think it's $100,000 a year at locals. So that's not a lot of money.
Oh, you try raising $100,000.
Oh,
if you're in clubland, to raise $100,000 is pretty hard.
I'm in clubland, thank you, Gelding.
Yeah.
But I'm junior sport.
Someone needs just to get the hold of your A-tips, Gelding, and get a few bets on.
Oh, yeah. They would have funded their whole year next year. They would have funded the whole year after yesterday.
All right.
I could have bought a case of gravitas.
Let's. Well, you can't anymore. It's sold out.
No wonder. Yeah.
Sold out? Is it sold out? Is it, Professor? Is that what the term is?
Sold out. All right.
There's only London left.
Gentlemen, let me ask you these questions. Season AFLW 7 has finished. It's in the books. Melbourne were the premiers. At the end of the AFL season, we knew A, when the trade period was, B, when the draft was, and C, when the next season was starting. We don't know any of that in respect to the AFLW, and the AFLW season's been finished now for nearly 3 weeks. So how can the competition be professional or being run correctly if we don't know any of those things and there's no indication of when we will know them?
Thanks, Professor. Next topic, please.
Professor, I think we've covered that off many times.
Okay.
They give a token. Like, if you have a look at the men's in today's paper,
Yep.
You have a full draw on the 11th of December. You're getting the draw for March next year, some 4 months in advance. Surely they can do the same for the women's, couldn't they?
Well, that's what I would expect, Judge.
Maybe they might be holding it off to bring it out for Boxing Day cricket, Professor. Make the announcement on when the cricket's on.
No, they might be waiting for the Sydney to Hobart gun to go off. One of the great sports.
Professor, the 26 question, the AFL, they know they need the women's game. They just don't respect it. And it's a very slow burn, and they might in, 10 years, 15 years, but they don't now. And that's absolutely self-evident. Every single week we talk about this, and it's not changing much.
No. All right. We might get on to a bit of rugby. Paul, been a while since we've been on, but in that time, the Kangaroos and the Gillaroos both won.
They have, and I think it's a fantastic tournament with quite a few surprises. I compared earlier the Socceroos to Samoa. The first game in the World Cup, the Men's World Cup, way back in 16 October, England 60, Samoa 6. So possibly like after watching the Socceroos against France, no one would have expected the rise of Samoa, but they made it all the way through to the final against Australia. They were outclassed in the final, but on the way through, they beat England, the powerhouse of England, in their backyard by 1 point. Australia was very lucky to get through a very tight semi-final against New Zealand, 16-14. But at the end of the day, Australia ran out 30-10 winners over Samoa. But you've got to imagine it's much like the entirety of Morocco right now would be celebrating making the semi-finals of the World Cup of Soccer. The entire country of Samoa came to a standstill for that final. And I think it's great for rugby league that it's not just your traditional powerhouses, Australia, England and New Zealand. And it was really an amazing tournament. And I think, Professor, you should be excited about the Bulldogs for next year with the form of Josh Addo-Carr. We've talked a lot about how possibly he could be left out of the New South Wales team. He won't be next year, I can assure you that. But it was a great tournament for international rugby league, and some real highlights of the whole tournament, which went for quite a while, but it was a fantastic experience.
And the Socceroos won in a canter.
They did, but the semi-final, poor old Papua New Guinea, they beat them 82-0. New Zealand won 20-6 in their semi-final. So there is still some life in World Rugby League on the women's side, but they did win 54-4. Shame it wasn't a bit closer in the final, but there's just too much class players, and I'll take that back to the reason is that the women's rugby league competition is going better than ever. Yep. And I think all of those players play in that tournament, which turns them into battle-hardened players. They arrived just ready to rip in, and they did, and they just demolished New Zealand in that final. But I'm looking forward to the women's rugby league competition next year. That really delivered last year, and I'm hoping for the AFL that they can do similar with the women's game. But it really captured the imagination, the women's rugby league tournament.
And Paul, the effectiveness of actually playing at the same time during the season, I think it just continued to highlight where the AFLW and the NRLW, if that's what they call it, differ. Yeah. The great part about the Rugby League World Cup was it wasn't a great time for us to watch it, as in time zone, but the actual crowds were amazing. We did talk last time about the try zone, or how small it was, and the fact that Addo-Carr took one step and he was already over the fence. But the whole World Cup, from a promotion for the sport, was fantastic. Like, we're not talking just the men's, we're talking the women's as well. The last month and a half of rugby league, so on the back of a really cracking season of NRL, the World Cup was, I think, the pinnacle of the season.
Yes, and it's a tough one because you can take the view that the women's version of the sports should stand on their own. Rugby league's gone the other direction, and it's not that they're piggybacking, or it's not that they're playing second fiddle. It's that you've got a crowd there ready for rugby league, whether they're watching on TV or watching live. Why not put them on together? That doesn't mean they're piggybacking. I think it means they're capitalising on an appetite for rugby league that's there. There's eyes on screens or eyes on the field, and they've done it very well.
Professor, my only bitch about it is the name World Cup. I think there are 14 teams played, Paul. I think there's 220 countries in the world. Soccer's probably played in about 190. And can I just suggest that, apart from the fact that I think there's a surplusage of tournaments called the World Cup now, a better word would actually be the International Cup. Because when you compare football/soccer, which, as I say, it's got really everyone in the world playing it, when you have 14 teams playing it, it's a bit of a stretch to call it the World Cup. And as I say, it gets lost in the mix with all of the other World Cups around. And I just suggested, I always say don't bitch, put up a solution. Solution is the International Cup.
And I'll throw in the World Series there for you in the baseball, which
it's one country.
It's named after, it was a World Soap Powder, I think it was, and that was the first sponsor.
No, a newspaper. That was a world newspaper. So it's one country, but that's America for you. Because they've got exceptionalism, so they think they can call it that. But I just think it's a bit of a stretch, the World Cup.
Well, the NFL call themselves world champions after the Super Bowl, don't they?
That'd be right. Again, yeah.
Well, they're waiting for a team from somewhere else to step up and prove them wrong, I guess, in that particular sport. But, when you say stretch and Peter V'land's running the code, I don't think you should be overly surprised there, Judge, and it might not change anytime soon. I hate to disappoint you.
Gelding, can you frame a market for us on when Peter V'land's will strike the new pay deal for rugby league? Because they've been waiting quite a while for that to come to fruition.
Oh, Professor, whenever he decides what it is, it'll be announced. So it won't be done during the autumn carnival up there in Sydney, because then he'll make up a couple of new races to be run up there. So I'd be expecting a big announcement, rugby league, probably early February, Professor. Is there any World Cups on then?
No. When do you think, Paul?
Oh, it's a tough one. There's a fair bit apart, the players and the management. So you're going to need the steamroller style ScoMo approach from Peter, which he does very well. But it's up to, I think, the players as to how much they want. They've used the usual arguments about grassroots. A large part of what's driving them is self-preservation and getting the most for the players. It's a tough one because it is a short career. It's one of the most brutal sports on the planet. A lot of it revolves around how much the club should get as opposed to the players. But watch this space. I don't think it'll be done this year.
All right. Now, listen, this next topic, a warning to the viewers that there's a little bit of self-interest from the Gelding and Coutta in this next topic. Gelding, on yesterday's That's Racing, you and I gave our four best bets for the day at Sandown.
Yes, Professor, you were in fine form, let me tell you.
And the last leg of that 4 was a horse in race 8 called Riot and Rose.
Yes.
Peter Mooney horse, was it?
Yeah.
Isn't that a Black Star somewhere?
Yeah. And let me say that about 300 metres into the race, and it was a 1,400 metre race, I decided that the chances of us getting our 4th winner for the day had gone, because no horse had won from where Riot and Rose was. What were your thoughts on the race? Firstly, Gelding, and then I might ask Coutta, because he had a vested interest in the running of that race as well.
Let me first declare the self-interest side of it, Professor. We had a $5 win parlay on our horses yesterday. Tasman Park paid $5.70, so $5 on that gave us $28.50. We then, backing this new wonder horse, which I reckon will be just about anything, Detonated Jack at $1.60. So that took the parlay to $45. Then we had Life Lessons, which you picked, paying $4.50, which took the parlay up to $200, Professor. So we've had $205 riding on Riot and Rose at a $4.20 favourite. So that would have meant a payout of $860 for a $5 bet. So that is our self-interest. Let me say, when we do that racing, Professor, we talk about track conditions. We talk about the form of the horses. We talk about the jockeys and the trainers in their last 50 rides or runners. What I can't comment on is about incompetence of a jockey. I don't know how do we put it, Professor?
What did the stewards report say?
Hey?
What did the stewards report say? Yeah.
You want my quote?
We'll get the professor to read the stewards report.
The stewards report, Coutta, was very brief. It said, I'm just looking for it, race 8, Riot and Rose, slow to begin. That's it.
Now, David,
can I just jump in very quickly? So you can cut through all the clutter, all the BS, the technical phrasing. What is the equivalent of a steward saying, what the F was that for a ride? Like, how would they phrase it?
Well, remember, Luke Nolan was the jockey who was riding it. Yep. This was the jockey that had the brain fade and almost got an unbeatable horse in Black Caviar beaten when it went to England. I stopped riding it before the post. The first rule of racing for a jockey is that they must give their horse every chance of possibly winning a race. Right? That is the only intention, is that they have to ride that horse in a way that it can win that race. This horse was ridden in a way with the pattern of the day was never going to win that race. The stewards, I feel, have an obligation to then call that jockey. And remember, this is a favourite. And there's probably $200,000 invested on it just on the Victorian TAB alone, let alone forget about all the other betting agencies and so forth. The stewards haven't asked him a question. Why did you have the horse last? Why did you think the horse could win from there? At worst, well, to be nice, the best way I could put it as an incompetent ride. Then why aren't the stewards asking him, why did you put this horse in this position, and why is he allowed to continue riding without being questioned? As lawyers and accountants, if people make complaints about you, you're answerable to higher body and can obviously lose certificates. Surely jockeys are in the same position with the stewards. Now, just before you start on that, I'm just talking about the sprint races yesterday.
Wow, we really are going. Come on, Gelding.
No. To go through it, to win a sprint race yesterday at the 400-metre mark, right, which is the top of the straight.
Yep.
Run and Riot was 12 lengths off the winner, the leading horse. Now, you run a second in racing is 6 lengths. So we're 2 seconds behind the leading horse with 400 metres to go. So if they run like a 12-second furlong, we've got to run an 11-second furlong to get there. But race 1, the winner at the 400-metre mark in a 1,000-metre race was second. Right. Race 2 was a staying event. We'll leave that out. The winner, race 3, at the 400-metre mark was leading. Race 4 over 1,600, the winner was sitting 4th. Detonator Jack, which I think is going to be a sensational horse, was sitting 6th. We then go to race 6 of 1,400. Life Lessons is running 3rd. So where do you reckon Luke Nolan, supposed to be an experienced jockey, at the end of the day, you would have to be within striking distance of the top 3 or 4 to be winning a race. Here he puts the favourite 12 lengths behind it. By the way, the winner of that race,
in the race of life, Coutta, go on.
Who also mentioned, Mark also mentioned the winner, Savannah Cloud, was running 2nd at the 400-metre mark. Now, Judge, you're sitting on the bench.
Yeah.
I'm presenting you with this to say you've got to be in the first 4 at the 400-metre mark to have a chance of winning. You have to give your horse the best chance of winning a race. What would you say if I put the favourite last at the 400 metres, 12 months? Is that incompetent or negligent?
Well, thank you. And in the race of life, always back vested interest. It's the only horse that's trying. So I think your vested interest you disclosed how much money you would have made might have influenced. Gelding, on that analysis, you have to give the horse the best chance. The only way jockey can be found guilty is if it makes the horse go the opposite direction, I reckon. You can do anything you bloody well like. He obviously didn't run this race perfectly.
John, I had a look at his last start, and the jockey that was riding it, who got taken off, settled the horse 4th. So this is a horse that normally runs on pace. It has got to be, well, yeah.
How about we say this? It wasn't a good ride, Gelding. We'll just leave it at that. It wasn't.
And I was going to say
ride.
as well, when you say he's not
Professor,
accountable, there's one man he's accountable to. He's not known for holding back. Peter Moody. I'd love to know what he said after the race.
Yeah. Well, very, very quiet. And Professor, I believe you had a few choice words to say when I picked up the phone. I think it was bleep, 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 bleep ride, wasn't it?
Yes. It
wasn't a good ride.
It wasn't a good ride, Gelding.
Professor.
Well, I think you said a lot worse than a good ride, Professor.
Yeah,
it wasn't a good ride.
Yeah, but we're broadcasting at the moment, so
Professor,
there's limits to what I can say.
There was a lot of X's.
What's the what was the stewards report the other week, Professor, when they talked about market expectations?
Oh yeah, didn't run to market expectations. So I was expecting that actually.
That's what I was wondering, whether that little clinker would have been brought out, but no, it would have been a nice finish to the day. The boys, obviously, you provided good tips, and
let me say one thing also on that. Like, apart from being 12-length class, having a look at the paper, it was beaten a length and a half, John.
Yeah.
So
I'd love a steward to have a bit of sense of humour one day.
10 lengths
to say
on the winner.
Hey, Gelding, too bad it started slowly. That's all I'll say.
I'd love to steward to have a sense of humour one day to say something like, went about as well as a fart in a spacesuit, something like that.
Gelding,
before,
are you okay, Gelding? That's probably the question. No, you're not. No.
And there was certainly a bit of swearing at the TV, and then I picked up the phone and copped an earful, and I wasn't even riding it.
Oh,
who from?
From the Professor.
Judge, we might, before we go to Gelding's tips quickly, we might just look at the fiasco that was Cricket Australia. Why wouldn't you just say, well, why would you worry about disqualifications? And the best thing I've seen, well, the best article I read about it was, once they were disqualified, it just should have been left at that. Then what happens then is they just don't get reappointed.
It's just ridiculous. And I won't spend all the time going into the minutiae but it's fascinating that they took 5 days to make a decision, and 4 years later, we're still talking about it. We've got to say, Professor, though, the Sports Integrity Australia has hit the media for the first time, I think, since Sports Integrity Australia. And it turns out, I thought they had a case running. You know, we feel sorry for all their 50 arbitrators who are sitting waiting for their phone call. It's sort of like you're running a telethon to raise money for ex-politicians, and no one's going to use a phone, no one's going to ring. They're just sitting there waiting for a case. That I thought they actually had a case. But what's happened is that Cricket Australia has totally misunderstood Sports Integrity Australia's rules. So it hasn't got a case, and it's just becoming an element of confusion. No, it's a bit of a disgrace, and I actually feel a bit sorry for Warner and Smith now. This is becoming an annual topic, which we keep coming back to. And apart from the fact that Warner will probably get dropped soon, because of his form, and we're still talking about this nonsense, 4 years on. Cricket Australia's got no idea what it's doing.
Oh, well.
Hasn't for 5 years, John.
Yeah.
John, what's sports run by? Idiots, isn't it?
The world is run by idiots, and so is sport. And nowhere is that better exemplified than in cricket, I reckon.
Well, I think the AFL's glad that Cricket Australia is such a basket case at the moment. So our premier sport, which is cricket, is absolutely hopeless at the moment. Poorly run. With the big bash coming up, it starts this week, I'm led to believe. Let's see how it goes. Tuesday night.
I actually see an axis change, Coutta, without being too big about it. Women's sport is going to become, and we've been saying for years that it could be an axis point soon where people say, I'm sick of this. I'm sick of the men's footy game. I'm sick of the men's cricket. Look what the women are doing in soccer. football. Look at what they're doing in cricket. Look at what they're doing in the Olympics, swimming. They're making us proud. Basketball, and that's what we want out of our national teams.
Yeah. With regards to cricket, David Warner wouldn't be in the conversation for captaincy anyway, so why are we even talking about it?
No. You're not in a conversation to play, if you ask whether what he's got his current form.
Well, I just think, again, it's been handled poorly, communications. The interesting one, Judge, as well, has been the amount of time or the balls of coverage by Justin Langer. Now he's one of the key recruits for Channel 7's Cricket of Summer.
Yeah.
Summer of Cricket, sorry.
And to watch 501.
And he's been everywhere. He's doing everything for Channel 7. This is obviously on the back of his book and all the comments and everything like that. Cricket's in a bit of a mess at the moment, and financially as well, Gelding.
Yep.
It's worse danger, Coutta.
They were bankrupt. They were basically bankrupt 12 months ago.
Yeah.
With all this money coming in and things like that. They, again, administrators who like to look after themselves. And, there's probably about, 15, 16 players that are just lining their pockets. And, Warner's one of them. And I certainly won't be worried when we see the back of him.
Professor, we talk about CEOs and everything. One of the great miracles, I'll call it a miracle because I think it is that the Tennis Australia CEO or the Australian Open Tournament Director is still in his role. There's been nothing from last year or this year, sorry, in regards to the Djokovic. I'm assuming he just has an open-ended contract and, can't get sacked.
Be interesting to see what the chairperson of Tennis Australia has to say at her speech on the night of the finals, mate. See what confidence she's got in the CEO. In any event, Gelding, let's wrap up 2022 with some best bets for today's racing.
All right, Professor. Look, just some horses to follow out of yesterday. Tasman Park, definitely get on Detonator Jack. And I've got one up in Brisbane, Professor. One of my favourite movies, Godfather. This horse won a 2-year-old race up there. So back it in the Magic Million, 2-year-old race. They brought it for 1.1 million. It's I'm Invincible colt. So that's one to follow going forward. Also today at Bendigo, Professor, I like race 2, number 13, there. A Mar Eustace horse. That might build a bank, Professor. Going to have a nice little couple of parlays up in Sha Tin, where the international race meeting is on today. Just offering a quiet 120 million Hong Kong dollars, which is equivalent of about 20 million Australian on offer today. So I'm going to have a parlay 2-3, Professor. Race 4, number 9, Win Marilyn, to be ridden by Damien Lane, a Japanese horse. Into race 7, number 1, Golden 60, in their mile, probably their best sprinter. And then going into their Hong Kong Cup, race 8, number 1, Pantalaza, Professor, another Japanese horse. So hopefully the Japanese can have a good day and we might get a little parlay up, which might add to a little Christmas booty.
And might make up for yesterday's loss.
Well, it wasn't a loss yesterday.
I mentioned the war, Professor.
Yeah.
It was a win, but
we had a winning day, Gelding.
It could have been a bigger win.
Yeah,
but
you've won more cups in Barcelona, Gelding. I'm going to get on that tip in Hong Kong tonight.
Yeah, go the parlay 2-3, Giraffe.
We'll do.
All right, gentlemen, thanks very much for your commitment and your participation during the year. It's much appreciated. And it's a Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to you all and to all the viewers as well. And until 2023, have a very good afternoon.
Merry Christmas and well done, Professor.
Good, guys.
I don't know.